The gavel struck hard against sun-cracked wood. Dust lifted from the boots of men gathered in the open lot just outside Fort Worth. The air smelled of cattle, sweat, and something far uglier, desperation dressed as business. "Next lot," the auctioneer called. "Foreclosed ranch assets, livestock rights, equipment, and remaining contractual dependents." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Contractual dependents. That was the polite way to say widow. Elena Morales stood near the back of the platform, her hands resting protectively over the gentle curve of her pregnant belly. Her black dress was plain, sleeves rolled despite the chill. She did not cry. She had done that already, when her husband's heart gave out in the field 3 months ago, leaving behind debt thicker than barbed wire. He had borrowed to save the ranch after a drought. The bank had waited exactly 90 days before reclaiming everything, including housing rights, including her. Because her husband, in desperation, had signed a labor security clause. If assets defaulted, remaining contracted labor transferred with sale until debts were cleared. She had not known. Now she stood listed as obligation. Some of the men avoided looking at her belly. Others stared too long. "Bidding starts at 15,000. Voices tossed numbers lazily, more interested in the land than the human cost tied to it. Elena's jaw tightened. She would not beg. She would not collapse. If she was going to be handed from one stranger to another, she would at least remain standing. From the edge of the crowd, a tall figure leaned against a fence post, hat low, eyes unreadable. His name was Caleb Turner. He hadn't come to buy anything. He had come to watch the bank strip another ranch bare. He knew the pattern: drought, loan, default, auction. But when the auctioneer mentioned contractual dependence, something inside him sharpened. 17, 18. The numbers crawled upward. Elena felt the baby shift, a small, rolling movement beneath her ribs. She pressed her palm gently against it. "I will protect you," she promised silently, though she had no idea how. 22. Silence followed. The ranch wasn't prime land. The well had run dry once. The barn needed repair. The auctioneer lifted the gavel. "Going once? 30. The voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. Heads turned. Caleb stepped forward, removing his hat slowly. Dust clung to his boots. His expression held no arrogance, only decision. 30,000, he repeated. A few ranchers scoffed. It was more than the land was worth. "Going twice." No one countered. "Sold." The gavel fell. Just like that, her fate shifted. The paperwork was handled quickly, efficiently. The bank manager didn't look Elena in the eye as he explained the transfer conditions to Caleb. She remains under labor obligation until outstanding balance is considered satisfied. Caleb's jaw hardened. She's not cattle. It's contractual. Elena stepped forward before the tension could escalate. She met Caleb's gaze directly for the first time. His eyes were steady, not greedy, not soft either. "You claimed me," she said quietly. The word hung heavy. His brow tightened. "I claimed land." "And debt," she replied. "I am debt." A muscle flexed in his cheek. The crowd began to thin, sensing the spectacle was over. Elena lifted her chin slightly, though her voice trembled at the edges. "If you think I will work until I collapse, understand something first." Caleb studied her. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "I am not alone." Her hand pressed against her belly. "And this child does not belong to any contract." The statement shifted something in him. "You threatening me?" he asked quietly. "I am warning you." Wind swept across the lot, tugging loose strands of her dark hair free. "I can cook," she continued. "I can mend fences. I can clean. But I will not let anyone treat my child as repayment." Caleb held her gaze longer than comfort allowed. In her eyes, he didn't see fear alone. He saw fire, protective, raw, unbreakable. How far along? He asked finally. 7 months. He exhaled slowly. The bank manager approached with final documents. Caleb signed without flourish. Then he turned back to her. You ride? I have before. He nodded toward his truck. You're coming with me. She didn't move immediately. Under what terms? The question surprised him. You don't belong to me, he said evenly. You work the ranch. You earn wages. Debt clears faster that way. And when it clears, you're free. She searched his face for deception, found none she could read. And the child? Never part of the deal. Something inside her unclenched, but only slightly. The drive west stretched long beneath a fading sun. The Texas horizon burned orange and gold. Neither of them spoke for miles. Finally, she broke the silence. Why overpay? He kept his eyes on the road. Because vultures were circling. I could have survived. Maybe. His answer wasn't insulting, just honest. The Turner Ranch appeared near dusk, fencing strong, cattle scattered across open pasture, barns sturdy despite weathering. The house stood simple and white against the vast sky. She stepped down from the truck slowly, hand at her lower back. This is where I repay? She asked. This is where you work, he corrected. The bunkhouse needed cleaning, but it was solid. He carried her small trunk inside without comment. You rest tonight, he said. We talk schedules tomorrow. She watched him carefully. You are not afraid of scandal? He gave a faint shrug. Town's been talking about me since my wife died. They'll survive another rumor. Her expression softened briefly at that. That night, coyotes howled beyond the fence line. Elena lay awake on a narrow bed, one hand over her belly, listening to the unfamiliar rhythm of wind through tall grass. She had been auctioned, claimed, transferred like an asset. Yet something about the way he said, "You don't belong to me," kept echoing in her mind. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee drifting through the thin walls. She rose early, stubborn pride pushing aside exhaustion. By the time Caleb entered the kitchen, she had already started biscuits. You were told to rest, he said. I was told I work here, she replied calmly. A flicker of reluctant respect crossed his face. Days began to form a pattern. She cooked, managed books when she discovered his records were a mess, insisted on fair accounting of her wages against debt. He argued once. She won with numbers. But whispers reached them by the second week. At the general store, at church. Lone cowboy buys pregnant widow at auction. The words twisted uglier each time they were repeated. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher rode up, curiosity poorly disguised as concern. You sure that's wise? The man muttered to Caleb within earshot. Town thinks you bought yourself trouble. Caleb's expression didn't change. Town's free to think. Elena stood on the porch, hearing every word. That evening, she confronted him. You will lose standing because of me. I don't stand for gossip, he replied. But you stand for me? The question lingered between them. He met her eyes fully. I stand for what's right. She swallowed, emotion tightening unexpectedly in her chest. Weeks passed. The baby grew heavier. So did the stairs from town. Then one evening, as a storm rolled dark across the plains, headlights appeared at the end of the drive. A black carriage from the bank, and two men stepping out with expressions that promised nothing good. Elena's breath stilled. Caleb moved to stand beside her as thunder cracked overhead. The taller man unfolded a document slowly. There appears to be a miscalculation, he announced smoothly. Outstanding debt was underestimated. Lightning flashed. Rain began to fall. Elena felt cold seep through her bones. They're trying to take it back, she whispered. Caleb's jaw hardened as the storm gathered force around them. And in that charged moment beneath a violent Texas sky, Elena realized something far more dangerous than being claimed at auction. Someone wanted her returned. The word spread through town before the dust from the auction yard had even settled. Someone powerful. Someone rich enough to believe money could undo a public claim. Someone dangerous enough that men lowered their voices when they said his name. Silas Ryland heard it first from a stable boy who rode hard to his ranch at dawn. The boy's horse was lathered white with sweat, its flanks trembling. The boy swallowed before speaking. "Mr. Ryland, Mr. Harlan Voss says the widow belongs to him. He's filed papers with the county. He says the auction was unlawful. He says she'll be collected by sundown." Inside the small ranch house, Clara froze. She had been standing by the window, one hand pressed to the small of her back, the other resting protectively over the gentle swell of her belly. She had known it would come. Her warning at the auction had not been a plea, it had been a promise. Silas did not curse. He did not shout. He simply adjusted the cuff of his shirt and asked, "Did Voss say why he wants her?" The boy hesitated. "He says her husband owed him $300. He says she's payment." Clara closed her eyes. $300. The price of her late husband's final gamble. Harlan Voss was not merely a creditor. He owned half the rail supply contracts in the territory. He financed cattle drives. He lent money to desperate men and collected with interest carved from bone. He had attended the auction but never bid. He had stood at the edge watching, measuring, waiting. Silas dismissed the boy with a coin and shut the door softly behind him. He turned to Clara. She did not look fragile now. She looked resolute. "I told you," she said quietly, "taking me would cost you." He walked closer until only a step separated them. "Are you afraid?" "Yes," she admitted, "but not for myself." Her hand tightened over her belly. Silas studied her face as though memorizing it. "Then we won't give him what he wants." By midday, a rider approached in a fine black coat despite the heat. He carried himself with the polished ease of a man accustomed to obedience. Harlan Voss dismounted without waiting to be invited. He glanced at the ranch house, the fencing, the land, calculating worth in every inch. "Mr. Ryland," Voss said smoothly, "you acquired something yesterday that belongs to me." Silas stood in the yard, hands resting loosely at his sides. She stood on that block same as anyone else. She was collateral. Voss's eyes shifted toward the house. Her husband signed papers. Clara stepped under the porch before Silas could answer. She did not hide behind the door. She descended the steps slowly, her chin high. "My husband signed nothing that binds my child." Voss's smile thinned. "Your husband signed everything that binds you." Silas moved slightly, positioning himself not in front of Clara, but beside her. It was a small gesture, yet it shifted the balance. No shield, no ownership, a stance of equal ground. "What exactly do you want?" Silas asked. "I want what is owed," Voss replied. "Return her to my custody. I'll refund your bid." "I don't want your refund." Voss's gaze hardened. "Then perhaps you misunderstand. I am not requesting." The wind picked up, drawing dust across the yard in restless curls. Neighbors lingered at distant fence lines, watching. Clara spoke before Silas could. "If you take me, Voss, you expose your own crime." His attention snapped to her. "Careful. My husband didn't gamble away $300. He uncovered something." Her voice did not tremble. "He discovered your false ledgers, the double accounts, the railroad bribes. He confronted you. You called in the debt the next day." A flicker passed through Voss's eyes, anger sharpened by surprise. Silas did not look at Clara. He kept his gaze fixed on Voss. "Is that true?" Voss laughed lightly. "The word of a grieving widow?" Clara reached into her apron pocket and drew out folded papers. The edges were worn, but the ink was dark and unmistakable. "Copies," she said. "He hid them before he died. I found them after." Silas took the papers without breaking eye contact with Voss. He unfolded them slowly. Numbers, columns, seals that did not match. For the first time Harlan Voss's composure cracked. "You have no idea what you're meddling in," Voss said quietly. "This territory runs on my credit. If I fall, so do half the ranchers here." "Then maybe they deserve to know what holds them up," Silas answered. Voss stepped closer, voice low and venomous. "You think you can protect her? You live alone on open land. No hired guns, no brothers, no alliances. One accident, one fire, one missing herd." Silas did not move. "You threaten poorly." Clara felt fear coil in her stomach, but she lifted her chin. "If anything happens to this ranch, the copies go to the governor in Cheyenne." Silence fell heavy and electric. Voss studied her belly, then her face. He calculated again. Risk, exposure, reputation. "This isn't finished," he said at last. He mounted his horse in one smooth motion. "Sundown tomorrow, maybe you'll reconsider." He rode away, but the threat lingered like smoke. That night the sky stretched wide and cold above the ranch. Silas sat at the table, lamplight flickering over the stolen ledgers. Clara sat opposite him, exhaustion lining her face. "You could still walk away," she said softly. "Give me up. I won't blame you." He looked at her then, really looked at her. Not as a purchase, not as a burden, but as a woman who had stood before a town and defied a tyrant while carrying new life inside her. "I don't keep things that don't want to stay," he said quietly, "and I don't surrender people to wolves." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Before dawn, fire lit the eastern pasture. Flames leapt through dry grass, racing toward the barn. The smell of smoke tore Clara from sleep. She stumbled onto the porch as Silas ran toward the blaze with buckets and grit. Neighbors arrived, beating at flames with wet blankets. By the time the sun rose, the fire was contained, but the warning was clear. Someone wanted her returned, and they would burn the world to make it happen. By noon, 3 ranchers rode in quietly. They dismounted without ceremony. One was old and stooped, another young and fierce, the third silent as stone. "We saw the smoke," the oldest said, "and we heard things." Silas handed them the copied ledgers. No speeches, no persuasion. They read. Color drained from their faces. "If this is real," the young one whispered, "he's been bleeding us dry for years." "It's real," Clara said steadily. The silent rancher finally spoke. "Then we don't let him take her. Not for debt, not for silence." Word spread faster than fear. This time when riders approached the Ryland Ranch near sunset, they did not find one man and a pregnant widow. They found neighbors. Harlan Voss rode at the head of 4 armed men. He reined in sharply at the sight of gathered ranchers lining the fence line. "This is foolish," Voss called out. "You defend fraud?" The old rancher stepped forward. "We defend truth." Silas walked to the center of the yard. Clara stood on the porch behind him, not hidden, but not alone. "You said sundown," Silas said calmly. "It's here." Voss scanned the crowd. He saw resolve, not hysteria, not doubt. "You think a few farmers frighten me?" he sneered. "No," Silas replied, "but exposure might." From the porch, Clara held up one last folded envelope. "Copies already left this morning, with riders headed in 3 directions." Voss's jaw tightened. For a long moment no one moved. The only sound was wind through grass and the restless stamp of horses. Then slowly Harlan Voss smiled again, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Keep her," he said at last. "Enjoy your purchase." He turned his horse. He rode away. This time, no one believed he would return. Weeks passed. The investigation began quietly. Rumors turned to inquiries. Inquiries turned to charges. The empire Harlan Voss built on paper began to fracture. At the Ryland Ranch, life did not return to what it had been. It became something new. Clara's laughter grew easier. She moved through the house not as property, but as partner. She and Silas argued gently about fence lines and seed purchases, and which room would hold the cradle. The night her labor came, it was a storm that shook the windows. Silas held her hand through every cry, every fear, every memory of loss. At dawn, a daughter entered the world with fierce lungs and steady heartbeat. Silas looked at the child, then at Clara. "You warned me," he said softly. She managed a tired smile. "I did. You said taking you would change everything." She nodded. He brushed a thumb over his daughter's tiny hand. "You were right." Outside, the land stretched wide and unburned. The ranch stood. The neighbors stood. The truth stood. Someone had wanted her returned. Instead, she had found a home.